Hello there, everyone. It's Christy. It is Sunday. It is a new time in Germany. Sorry, I got things organized late this week. Our clocks moved, so probably people are going to show up in an hour's difference of time, and the show will be over. For which I apologize. I'm so sorry, but yeah, our clocks went forward this week, so we should now be back on the same time schedule as America. So hello, everyone. Yeah, hi. It is Christy. It is, as I said, Sunday. So hello to you wherever it is, whenever it is you are. Oh God, I'm gonna ignore the chat right now because I'll come to that. So I have two things that I want to discuss today. First off, I have to say, when I come on and do these shows, a lot of times I either have spontaneous extra energy to be positive and up and to convey that to you, because I think that that is what our job is, like, in some ways. You know, we're here to entertain, but and I see my position when I come on air is to be uplifting and to try to, you know, make things slightly less crap. Honestly, it's getting harder and harder to do that. It's getting harder and harder to carve out spaces that don't feel entirely trivial, to talk about things that are not the coronavirus. So, you know, we did that on the happy hour. It's almost impossible, though, you know, to try to keep a comedy show going in the middle of a pandemic. On the other hand, I think it's also super important to keep a comedy show during a pandemic, because we need to find some outlets. And anyway, that's all a very long way of saying, on the Sunday show, I'm kind of struggling to come up with content that isn't just entirely trivial. So I'm going to cover the coronavirus. It's not happy. It's not positive. You're not going to feel uplifted leaving this show. I'm sorry. But that's kind of not where our energy is right now, is globally. And so I think rather than, you know, doing something which feels super frivolous like a PragerU video, I'm just going to deal with things head on. So we're going to talk about the coronavirus first. And then we are also going to discuss the allegations against Joe Biden that came out. I guess it was just like, well, it got revived, we should say. It got revived on Twitter, by Rose Twitter, earlier this week. And so I'm also going to talk about that, because immediately what you get, I find, and I'll just say this up front, you get burners who are using this instance, these allegations, to push people to vote for Bernie, not because they actually care about the allegations. The allegations are a convenient way to beat up people who indicated that they support Biden, and I think that's entirely cynical and wrong. And I think, yeah, so I'm gonna try to find what I think is my middle path between here. Not completely dismissing the allegations, but also not being manipulated by burners who really don't care about this woman other than to use her as a stepping stool to push Bernie into the nomination that he couldn't win with the popular vote. And so I'm just going to say that, because that is happening. Burners are using these allegations to try to leverage a nomination Bernie can't win on his own. And yeah, I said it. So we're going to start first with... my analysis makes me calm. It makes you calmer. I did weirdly have reviews on my lecturing when I was at the university, teacher instructor evaluations, that said that students left my lectures feeling uplifted. If you can leave a quantitative analysis lecture feeling uplifted, I guess that's a life skill. All right. So let's talk about first things first. And generally, the coronavirus data is pretty grim. I don't know how you guys are coping. One of the ways that I find I cope is by relying on statistical analysis, because it allows me to try to get a handle on the situation in a way that gives the illusion of control. You know, the being in the moment, live, watching the cases being reported, the obituaries that are rolling in, all of that kind of stuff feels, and it is, entirely psychologically and emotionally overwhelming. So when you have something like a data model and you can look at past behaviors and you can try to use our knowledge to model out where we are and project out where we're going. One, we need it for planning. We need it for public health planning because those models are based on observed reality. And so they're very, very important to actually guide us into the most accurate. So the whole point of a model is to allow us to predict the future accurately. And that's very difficult because the future changes and it's hard to say. So having these models allows us to make the best guesses, and to make the best estimates. And for me, abstracting it out from individuals is a way to feel like a sense of control. It's a lie. Ultimately, reality is going to do what it wants to do. Things are going to change. Events will happen. But at least temporarily, there is an illusion of control. Also, there's no sound coming on the Logitech, but I'm just going to mute that anyway. All right. Sure. Here's where things stand. Now, I want to point out before I get to the U.S. numbers, and I know I've just okay, yeah, you guys can see that. Can I make this a little bit bigger? I think I can. Yeah, that's good. I'm not blocking too much of the data. All right, so ideally, now you guys will be able to see this chart. This was updated on March 28th, just in the last 24 hours or so. Hold on, it's a sunny day. Now I see dust on my keyboard, and I can't abide by it. It's just going to bug me the whole time, so I'm just going to dust it off. Sorry, I should have done this before the show. I didn't have time. I was making coffee. All right. If you guys don't know about this, the Financial Times has dropped the paywall on their on like 3 running coronavirus articles, or actually a lot of their coronavirus articles. So has the Washington Post. I don't know if the New York Times has, but a lot of newspapers are dropping their paywalls in order to get public information out. Very important, very necessary. I approve. Looking at this data, what can we see? Actually, there's a lot you can infer from this chart. They've done a pretty good job. I mean, they've color coded it a little bit, but and they've also, I think, taken a couple different countries out because it was just getting too busy. It was getting hard to distinguish the lines, and they've done color coding here to try to make it a bit easier. But what we can see here is that especially Japan, South Korea had very, very bendy curves, super, super bendy curves. These are, I'm sure, or what are going to be looked at as model responses. Like, what did they do right to get their line this flattened? And from what I'm hearing in the news reports, there is a lot of experience being drawn upon in South Korea and Japan from SARS and other outbreaks. So it sounds like their populations were hit. Oh my God, Italy hit 10,000. Sorry. Yeah, so they had experience and they ramped up their plans and they had a very good effect. I think that there's maybe some little risk about about Japan, or was it South Korea, are starting to ease off on the restrictions and they're seeing another spike in cases. So there's concern that there might be a sort of the second wave or a second outbreak that they might have to restrict more, but I don't have all the details on that, so don't quote me. But these ones here in the bottom will be, I used to have the ability of making my mouse much easier to see, and I apologize that it's not. But anyway, Japan down here and South Korea. This means that at this point it takes every week. So how long does it take for the deaths to double? Does it take a week? Does it take 3 days? Does it take 2 days? And we've got here, as you can see, these lines. This one says every week. This one says every 3 days, every 2 days, and the top one is deaths double every day. So the steeper the line, the faster you climb, if that makes sense. So the slope of the line is such that the more straight up it is, it means a more rapid rate at which your deaths will double, and the more flat the line, the longer it takes. As we can see, the line in South Korea, their deaths are doubling more than every week at this point. And you can see here in China, initially started out, they were at their sort of peak in terms of morbidity. They were somewhere between every 2 days and every 3 days. Now, part of this will be skewed because of the reporting, right? So if there was a bunch of cases that they retroactively assigned as coronavirus, or like in Italy, there was a spike because they found a bunch of people dead in a nursing home, the line's not going to be always perfect. But generally, you can see over time that the trend has been in China, and yeah, I know we can't trust the Chinese numbers per se, but who cares? Everybody, you can see other people's lines too, right? So we don't just have to use data from China. Iran also pretty questionable in terms of accurate reporting, but they have this curve line, and we're starting to see now Italy, although it spiked earlier, and through the first like 12 days, they were not that far off of where Iran and China were, but I think Iran and China started their lockdowns a bit earlier. When did Italy start theirs? Yeah, Italy, 800 people had died before Italy started their lockdown, whereas in China started their lockdown after 30 deaths, 30. And in Italy, it waited until 800. So this will be something that statisticians will want to look at. They'll want to control for the date of a national lockdown in order to see how much the lockdown helps us explain the reduction in cases in a lagged, let's say, 2 or 3 week time period. So it'll probably be some sort of time series analysis that they'll do in their own way. I know how time series analysis works in quantitative social science, political science stuff. I don't know if I would just assume it transfers to population studies. I'm just going to check, by the way. All right, you're just talking about socialism and Bernie. Okay, that's fine. I want to keep on this topic right now. So, as we see, the curve was bent relative to what relative to what Italy and Spain is doing. Right, the Chinese and the Iranians, allegedly, were able to pull that curve down. And they're both authoritarian regimes, so it kind of makes sense that even if they're not reporting all of the deaths accurately, they would be able to manage this kind of outbreak because they don't have to worry about democratic freedoms or due process or constitution. They don't have anything like that, which clearly is a bad thing to live in. On the other hand, it confers I don't want to say advantages, but systems under which this can be done. Italy, as we see, in contrast, a free Western nation, also with a high elderly population, but their curve is now starting to mirror where China is going, but we will still continue to see this line go out. What we want to see, obviously, is for them to lower the rate at which people are dying, and they have actually been pretty successful in terms of, if you look here where their rate was for most of it, they were at every 3 days they were doubling, and they finally seem to have crossed this line where they're slowing down. And that is after how many days of lockdown? Italy goes on lockdown here on day 15 after the 10th death. So in order to make all of these countries comparable, they all have a start date of when the 10th death was recorded, whatever the date of that 10th death was. So we're all sort of like shifted, not based on the calendar, but based on an event, which should make it easier to compare as opposed to trying to do it over different months. Right, so Italy went on lockdown on day 15 after the 10th death, and we're starting to see some real advantages, 10 days, 15 days later. And they've been on lockdown for going on 3 weeks now. So their rate of infection is actually dropping. It's actually slowing quite a lot from what I remember. Do we have the death rate? These are deaths again. Cases. Yep, cases. Here we go. Yep. So look at how instead of going up and up and up, the Italian cases, which are still in terms of rate outpacing China, but they have pulled that down compared to the trajectory they were on over here. which would have been, if it kept going straight, it would hit where Spain is right now. So Italy is seeing an effect of their lockdown. The thing is delayed. It's delayed by a lot. This doesn't have, sadly, I wish they did. This one doesn't have the information on when they locked down. Number of days since the 100th case. So I can't just apply the same metric of time because it's a 100th case, not the 10th death. And these are two different ways of organizing time. So I can't tell you, we can't look at it, eyeball it here, when Italy's lockdown happened. But you can compare the rate here. You can see like South Korea pulled their expansion of cases, positive cases down. Iran too, and China and Italy, after being locked down, they're finally slowing the times at which I would assume the cases double. Yeah. So again, it's about doubling. So they're now, it takes more than 3 days for their cases to double, and it has for a while. So that should have a lagged effect on the death toll. If we look here, we can see a lot of other countries in Europe on a similar trajectory to Italy, which is terrifying, but not as terrifying as what the United States is going to face, and that's what we're going to look at next. Right, so we've got that. If we consider Italy a baseline for European countries in terms of how they perform, you can see that France is currently really just like shadowing Italy, and they went into lockdown after 175 deaths. So they went into lockdown actually much earlier than the Italians did. And if our current patterns hold, what we should see is that France continues to underperform. That's not the way I want to put it. Is to report fewer cases. They should basically stay under Italy now. If the effects of the lockdown are consistent, I mean, obviously policies are different because the Italian lockdown is a lot more stringent than the French one, so that's something also that we'd have to consider. So I've got a hair in my face somewhere and it's tickling me and I can't find it. But if the French measures are as efficacious as the ones in Italy were, or pretty close, what we should see is France's line should start to cross and they should start dropping in terms of their death rate from every 2 days to every 3 days, let's say in another 5 days or so, right? Or 7 days. Maybe they'll flatten that line even more. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Spain is in a world of hurt. They are making progress, though. You can see here that Spain has had one of the fastest rates in Europe. They are the outside edge, which is the fastest rate. That's a bad place to be. And what they've done is they went on lockdown. They saw eventually, their line changed. Looks like about after the first 5 days. If we take this little dip here as anomalous, and we just arc this out, it's a pretty straight line actually, but we want to see more of a curve in that line. So ideally, we'd want to see Spain end up closer to where Italy is or underneath it. But right now, there's a gap, and unless something else changes, their trajectory seems to be bending. They seem to be bending, but it's a much higher arc, which means they're going to stay in the faster rate for longer. Which means right now we'd predict continuing increased numbers of deaths. They'll easily hit 10,000, unfortunately. The UK is also on the same line as Italy here, and they've only gone into lockdown very recently. I don't even see the UK lockdown. I see the Spanish lockdown and the Italian, but I haven't seen the UK one. So at the moment, I think that they've revised the models from worst case scenario, and they've got some real data to work on. But clearly, what I'm going to be looking for here when looking at the UK line is to see where it starts to bend. And the bend is obviously the good thing that you want. It's right about here in this position where it stops going straight up for Italy and is starting to arc a little bit. The French numbers too are arcing. I don't think the UK numbers will start to arc for a little while yet. I think the UK numbers are going to be more like the US numbers. personally, but we'll see where things go. So the UK right now, they are not as bad as Spain, although I think that there's a bit of a delayed effect that's going to be happening in terms of the wave because they didn't do the lockdowns. Again, we'll see. And yeah, I think UK it's a completely different ballgame because of how late they had the lockdowns and for how long they didn't do anything to really do social isolation. Now let's then bring it on to the really scary line. This US line terrifies me. And I wish I could sugarcoat it or say it any other way, but these US numbers are the worst numbers on the chart. And that's because of where the line is going. If you, I mean, it's a little early days. Also, it's a bit confusing with all the colors here. So it's kind of difficult. You can see, though, that the UK had initially a higher rate, but kind of drifted downwards a little bit. We're going to see what happens. It's kind of hard to disambiguate that line from the French and Italian line because it's burgundy and then black and dark blue. I think we'll get probably more clarity over time. But everything here we see is arcing. You see how these arc. UK one, not so much. We can tell, although the rate at which people's are dying is going down. That's good. The US rate is increasing. As far as I can see, we're the only country on this chart that is picking up the pace, not slowing it down. And let me explain how I see that. So if we look at the US line here, it's sort of this fuchsia color. And as you can see, when we started off in the fuchsia color here, we were always below deaths doubling every 3 days. Right? We were much closer toward heading toward a rate of every week early on, right? So if our arc had started here and kind of followed what Italy did, we would be at a slower rate. But what's happened instead, if you can see this, is that every time, except for one, every time a daily report has been published, the rate has gotten closer to doubling every 3 days. So whereas on day 16 after the 10th death, we were still under the rate of every 3 days. Yesterday, we've crossed the line now. We're on the line. We're getting faster, or deaths are happening at a more accelerated rate. So instead of the line bending and slowing down, we're doing the opposite. And that means that not only are we seeing now, because we don't have a national lockdown, we have no kind of lag on the spread, and we do regionally. Places like New York and the States now are slowly starting to come online, but it's not a national phenomenon. And as far as I know, you can still travel between borders. You can still travel around the United States. I think they're starting to stop domestic flights, but in terms of a national lockdown, that's just not happening. In fact, some places, governors are trying to lift restrictions on social isolation. And so at this rate, not only are we not slowing, we look to be picking up speed. We don't have a systematic lockdown. And everything with coronavirus takes at least 2 or 3 weeks to hit, like in terms of having an effect. So if you go on a lockdown, you're not going to see a reduction in cases for 2 to 3 weeks. Maybe 4 weeks, right, to really catch the effect. Because for the rest of because we're already like dealing with things that happened in the past. People have been exposed, like Boris Johnson, who didn't show symptoms for maybe days or weeks at a time, right? So now he's showing up as a case, but he was infected 3 weeks ago before the lockdown. And it's kind of like the lag, too, that makes it slightly difficult to think about how this is actually happening. Because we're watching the past. When somebody dies from coronavirus, we're watching the effects of something that happened maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, before measures were taken. Like long before, I've only been in lockdown for what? I don't know, the days are blending now. 1, 2, 3, March. When did I go on lockdown? Let me check. I think it was a Thursday. I should have made a note of this. How long have I been in? Thursday, the 13th? Does that sound right? I think so. So I've been on lockdown for not even 2 weeks yet. Right? That's the challenge of all of this. And look, I'm in the safest country in the world right now for coronavirus. Honestly, Germany feels like a big, like, panic room. We still have deaths. All right, don't get me wrong. We're actually like kind of drifting toward. We've got a sort of this doubling between 2 and 3 days. So certainly not on the same. You would think about it being faster than the U.S., but of course we started getting our cases and testing earlier. But the mortality rate, the death rate from coronavirus is just the lowest here that people are recording for a lot of different factors, which we've talked about on a bunch of different shows. But I am, for end of the day, wherever I live, I consider myself an American. And I feel that socially constructed identification with my fellow Americans. And when I see this line with this trajectory, which is only getting faster, as someone pointed out, at this rate, I think we're going to be hitting 10,000 dead in total in, what is this, like basically 7 days. And if you extrapolate this out, which they're going to have to start doing at the FT this week because we've cleared 10,000, so they're going to have to redo their charts now and increase it up to 20 or something. At this pace, in a week's time, this will be 10,000 a day without a bend in the curve. And the United States is the only country that's facing those kind of numbers. Again, we can't necessarily trust the numbers coming out of Iran or China, stipulated. But for open Western-style democratic governments, wherever they may be, the U.S. is just empirically doing terribly. Yeah, so sorry, I can't sugarcoat that. I don't know. Let's see. I think it's agreed that the variant in Italy is more aggressive than the originator in China. It's one of the points cited when talking about China not releasing information on patient zero. From my looking at the reporting, I think the higher number of deaths isn't necessarily from a mutation in the virus, so much as the Italian hospital system not being able to physically cope with the number of patients and them actually having to take people off of ventilators to let them die in order to save other people. So if Italy had the optimal number, let's say they had all the capacity to handle all of the people who came in with coronavirus, I think the death toll would be much, much lower. And the fact that they have to make those choices increases our death rate. It just does. I saw too that finally there's a little bit of like inner EU help going on with that. They are talking about the German government is offering now ICU flights. Yeah. From Italy to Germany, apparently in France too. So because the German government has its stuff in order, and it's got the resources now that they've sort of sorted out their own house, and we've done our lockdowns, and we made sure that everyone here can receive treatment. And I know that they were starting to send supplies out to Italy. Now they're just saying, okay, you can't, it's not just about the supplies, you don't have the space. So Germany is set to treat coronavirus patients flown in from nearby European nations worst hit by the pandemic. The country's military are flying COVID-19 positive patients in from France and Italy in an effort to help countries whose health services are struggling to cope with the crisis. An Air Force plane landed in Bergamo, northern Italy, this morning, and is due to return to Cologne. Hey, that's where they're bringing it all into us. West Germany, with 6 Italian patients who will be treated at various hospitals in the region. Newly released images have shown the remarkable equipment on board the plane, which is an Airbus A330 Medevac. So let me see that close up? Apparently not, so let's see if we can make it bigger. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Yeah, that's it. So they, wow. Yeah, that is actually pretty impressive. So they roll people in. They've got them all of the hospital gear and presumably all the straps and stuff to keep them safe for takeoff and landing and during any turbulence. So that's fantastic, and that's cooperation. That's what being a part of the European Union was meant to be about. And now that I think about it, I'm looking, like, I guess for reasons that make sense, but nobody is trying to help out New York by flying their patients to other hospitals. And yet 3 foreign countries can come together and organize the transfer of sick individuals in order to alleviate capacity in other countries because of the EU. Seems like a good thing, the EU. It seems like cooperation can save lives. Obviously, I'm being, pointedly sarcastic there, the pro-Brexit people. But, yeah, not good numbers, people. And, I was thinking the other night, what other time in my life have I felt this type of anxiety that I feel every day? Because there's an unfortunate familiarity of this anxiety when I look at these numbers from the FT, and like I said, my heart is my heart has an American flag on it, so I'm always obviously biased toward, or more interested in U.S. numbers. I remember, and then it hit me. On 9/11. On 9/11, there was a period of time in this. So at the time of 9/11, I had my own house. I was in a relationship, and my partner at the time, I was brushing my teeth or doing something in the bathroom, and he was in our bedroom. We had a television in that bedroom. He was watching the Today Show, NBC. That was like the tradition, and suddenly he just went, "Oh my God." And I came out of the bathroom and said, "What?" Because his tone was just shocked. And he said, there's been an accident. A plane has flown into one of the Twin Towers. And watching that day unfold, there was a horrible period of time on 9/11 before the buildings both fell, where we knew people were trapped at the top or at higher floors or somewhere else in the buildings, and they couldn't get out, and they couldn't save, and fire and rescue couldn't save them. Some of those people, sorry, content warning stuff, I guess I should put content, it's a depressing show anyway, yeah, some people chose to jump rather than wait for the flames, and they wouldn't show those people on the news, but they mention them. And knowing what was happening, being utterly incapable of helping or doing anything, knowing the inevitable outcome and just waiting for it, that's what this feels like when I look at the US numbers, except every single day. Except it never ends. Except there's no tower that inevitably will fall, and I don't know how long this is going on. So when I try to explain the anxiety, I think that's the closest I can explain to the horror I feel when I look at these numbers, because I know, just as with the comparison I think I made last time, when you see a supernova here on Earth, you're watching an event that actually took place how many millions of light years ago, but the light is only now just reaching us. And in the same way, there are people right now walking around with coronavirus who don't know they're going to be dead in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or that their partner is going to be dead in 2 weeks. But they are. And that's why it is so stressful for me. So, Yeah, I'm sorry guys. I said this wasn't going to be a very happy a very happy episode, but I have to be real with you because it feels wrong to lie. It feels so wrong to just kind of fake optimism. So I guess we're connecting through honesty instead. All right, I need a break from this because it's really super depressing and sad, and I don't want to cry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the music, and we're going to move to another equally awful topic, sexual assault, allegations, Me Too, and politics, in this case, being the last of those four elements. But yeah, I need to step away. I need to... Is my sound okay? I'm looking... I haven't paid attention to my levels at all. I'm seeing I'm a little bit quiet. So maybe I'll turn that up. Why? I mean, I was quiet last night on the show for the D&D. But anyway, I don't want to change it too much, but I'm going to tweak it up a bit. I'm going to put the music back on. I'm going to make some coffee. I'm going to get myself back together. I'm a little verklempt from all this. And so, yeah, people jumping. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to turn this off now. And we're going to come back and talk about something else soon. So I think I need about 5 minutes to do my coffee. I got my Hamilton mug here. Go get that, and we will be back. Let's do that. Okay. Talk to you guys soon. 5 minutes, not more. Well, hello and welcome back. How are you guys doing? Did you have a good break? I hope so. I'm trying to do that thing where, like, bring the music down, but I can't do, like, a simultaneous fade because I have to, like, drag it. It doesn't matter. Yeah, did you guys have a good break? I see some people want kitties in the chat to keep you company. Send pics to Christy to cheer us all up. Ah, thanks. Sat here, a life-size R2-D2. You are sanding a life-size R2-D2. Wow, that sounds fascinating. Please post pics on Twitter. That sounds amazing. I would love to see that. Alrighty ditey. Let's talk about another depressing topic, just generally. Sexual assaults in the Me Too movement and what it means to believe women. Okay. So here is where, here's my take, for what it's worth. Let's see. I remember, I'm old enough to remember, as the meme sort of phrase on Twitter goes, before Me Too. The world before Me Too. And in the world before Me Too, when a woman made an accusation of sexual assault or sexual harassment of any kind, and I'm going to use, I'm just going to I'm going to default to men and women because that is the more typical version of what happens. However, I want to acknowledge right now it is not the only version, and that people who are gay can be victims, and people who are bi and trans and everything else, right? So I don't want to sound like in my language I'm excluding those cases. I'm just going to use a more typical case, but please, I don't want to limit it. I don't want to be hetero or cis-normative in this way. All right, so acknowledged, stipulated, going forward, like, I get that. And you're right. We should acknowledge all the ways in which various people are not, various people can be and are victimized, and not always frame it in the sort of man-woman dichotomy. All right. So with that more expansive definition in mind, let's talk about a generic case. A woman would accuse a man of, let's say, sexual assault, and immediately the default was, I know people don't remember this because it was only 3 years ago, but there was the assumption she was after money, she was a gold digger, she was trying to get his reputation, or she was crazy, she was some mentally unbalanced woman, or she was some sort of harlot. Basically, the default was, before Me Too, that we had to assume, again, in the stereotypical case, the man was innocent. We had to give him almost like a presumption of innocence. And women, or anyone who makes the accusation, anyone who made an accusation, had the burden of proof. It was on them to not only like come out and make the accusation, but sort of like actually prove that they had credibility. And almost do that in the, like, before there was even a trial. So there was no, it was all, doubt was all cast at the accuser. And all of the credit and goodwill and assumption of innocence was used to shield the accused. Okay, that was before Me Too. Now, I don't know if it's perfect yet, but I think it's certainly gotten better. And the hashtag Believe Women does not mean that we just flip those things around, and now any man or woman or person who is accused of something is immediately assumed to be guilty unless they prove themselves innocent, right? Which would be the sort of, the 180 or an entire flip. We give every single word the accuser must be true, and we have to accept it without question, or we're somehow a terrible person, and anyone who's had an accusation leveled against them must be guilty. Until they prove that they're not, right? Now, not in a completely different way, in a completely different scenario. Right? Bering falsely accused me of doxing him, and and again, speaking only from my personal experience, I was quite happy for people to look at the evidence and to evaluate it for themselves, and to look at what he presented and look at what I presented and judge between us, because I knew I had the facts on my side, because I was innocent. I did not do what I was being accused of doing. In fact, he actually had accused the right person, Cobalt Cat, in an earlier video, and then changed his mind when he realized it was commercially advantageous to blame a feminist rather than an editor on Encyclopedia Germanica. Right? So I have been targeted and doxxed and harassed and swatted because of a false accusation. And my defense of that was the facts. You know, I was completely happy, as I said, I'll just say this again, laying out all of the facts as we had them and comparing them and going head to head. And there's a reason why Bering refused to debate me or talk to me live about this, because he knew he was a liar. So he hid in his little echo chamber and made accusations and then just got the views out of it. So I get the importance of having of looking at evidence rather than emotion and immediately, you know, believing the victim. If you believe the victim when it came to Bering in that sort of 180 way, as soon as he said anybody doxed him, you'd have to believe that they had doxed him until the other person proved themselves innocent, as opposed to saying, which is what the third way. Okay, so you know, in the old way, Bering would have been considered, you know, manipulative and crazy and a gold digger for accusing me. In a topsy-turvy world, everything he said would be true unless I said it could prove it was false, which again is not in balance. So believe women, you know, and again, I was around during Me Too, so I watched these changes happen. It's about treating women's claims seriously, to not make an accusation initially, to not assume their motives are bad, but to say, okay, you have an accusation. I think you really mean what you say. Let's have let's hear what you have to say. Let's see what other supporting evidence you have, whatever else. And when we look at the patterns of the way things went in the Me Too movement, for those of you who remember, early on, there was an accusation against George Takei. There was the Harvey Weinstein one, there was the Kevin Spacey one, the Matt Lauer one, Mark Halpert, all of these men whose names were being thrown out there, and multiple credible accounts with, you know, specific dates and instances and, you know, the consistent stories, the pattern all converged. You could see predatory behavior, basically, coming out of this. And George Takei's name was thrown into this. And it turned out to be completely false. Eventually, the accuser withdrew his accusations. But for me, it was a real cautionary tale. Should we just look at the sword? I know I looked it up earlier. Takei. Yeah. And I looked it up before because I wanted to make sure I had the right information. Yes. So it started off, 2017, and no, I don't want to. This is first free article. No, thank you very much, Vanity Fair. Back in November, while Hollywood is in the midst of an ever-growing series of accusations and allegations that began with the twin bombshell reports against Harvey Weinstein, former model Scott Bruton and his own offered tale to the Hollywood, that he had been drugged and groped by George Takei. 6 months later, Bruton has walked back his story, saying he doesn't actually recall a few key moments that he originally claimed happened. Right. So, that at the time concerned me because the Me Too movement basically rests on the idea that claims are credible, that accusations are made by people who are victims, and that we should stop demonizing people who make accusations and treat them seriously. And when someone makes a false accusation and that gets picked up and pushed, as the George Takei story did, and then it turns out that we've all been backing somebody whose claims we didn't really vet properly, someone who we just repeated what they said without really checking into it ourselves, and then that person withdraws their accusations, then the people who believed, who are out there believing, it also has a reflection back on you, that you were out there pushing a false narrative. So I do think that Me Too as a movement is bigger than any one individual case, and that the power of Me Too has been that when a victim comes forward, the claims are examined and seen to be credible, to have, matching data, all the information, and then oftentimes, but not always, so it's not a necessary condition, but it is a repeated one, other people who had the same experience feel emboldened to come forward and talk about their experience. So one person breaks their silence, and there's media coverage, and then a couple days later, another person breaks their silence saying, this happened to me too. And then a third person, yes, I also had this happen to me. They did this to me too, hence the me too, right? And what we identify are serial sexual predators, people who go out there, and it's not just a one-off, it's repeated patterns. That's kind of what Me Too has been particularly good at, using changing social norms in order to create a space where victims feel like they can come forward, so that predators like Harvey Weinstein are actually tried. And he might not be tried for every single case, but symbolically, his guilty verdict in a particular case is a bit of a vindication for all of the cases that can't be tried. So for me, believe women means taking their claim seriously. It doesn't mean blind faith. It doesn't mean turning off my brain. It doesn't mean that I'm going to repeat whatever accusations are made as soon as I hear them. And honestly, that's what I was asked to do. So it was 2 happy hours ago. So now I want to say, I don't know, what is today? Sunday? Wednesday night, maybe it was, Tuesday night? Maybe Wednesday night. I can't remember now. But I had a happy hour with Kevin and got off did the show, got off the computer, and I was checking Twitter before I went to bed. And someone in my mentions was brought up Tara Reade's name and said something like, are you going to condemn Biden? I was like, who, what, because what people think, and there's a sense of entitlement on Twitter that if there's some people who think if they know about a thing, you should already know about it and have formed an opinion. And it was, I think the show went till like 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night. So I was like, I don't know what this is. I'm going to bed now. And I started looking into it the next day. And there was also another thing I should say up front. Because a lot of people in my mentions link these things. It doesn't matter if Joe Biden dropped out of the race tomorrow. I'm never going to vote for Bernie Sanders. I will vote for somebody who is not running, who has suspended their campaign, before I will vote for Bernie Sanders. And it also feels, honestly, as I said before at the top of the show, that there is not an inconsequential number of Bernie people. Not Bernie people, I'm going to call them burners. The people who want to win, no matter what it takes. The people who want to win, even if he can't get over 30%. They are more interested in installing Bernie into the nomination than winning over Democratic votes. And I see these people trying to use this to bully anyone who they're using this accusation of sexual assault to bully people into voting for Bernie, which in my opinion is vile. And if you think that's not the case, let me just come down here. I saw a tweet earlier today that kind of summed it up. Hold on, these are my mentions. Who was it? Someone was basically telling me I was a terrible feminist because hold on, I know I took a picture of it, hold on, but I'm not going to show you guys where it is. It's in a conversation I had, and there's no reason you need to see that. So I can find the image though. Oh no, it's gone, dang it. Anyway, well, that's a bummer. Yeah, I had people in my mentions basically saying, if you can't be a good feminist unless my bookmarks. That's also not what I wanted. What was I looking for? No, maybe that was what I was looking for. I'm getting confused. Anyway, if I don't support the complete change in the structural things of material conditions, and therefore only Bernie is a feminist, and blah 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 blah. It's crap. All right, so I want to repudiate anyone who out of hand dismisses her claims. I would entirely reject, repudiate, and condemn anyone who said Tara Reade, doesn't matter what she says, she's a liar. That's wrong. That's 100% not an appropriate attitude to take. I also, personally, I want to say it on the record, I don't think her opinions on Russia have anything to do with anything. I really don't. I mean, her opinions on Russia are entirely irrelevant. And also, in terms of direct evidence that can be evaluated, whether she supported Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders is also irrelevant. Now, one could say, in terms of her motives to come forward, her being a Bernie Sanders supporter might have created a motivation for her to come forward, but that doesn't, at the end of the day, have any her motivations on why she came forward doesn't affect the quality of whether or not we can evaluate the consistency in her stories. So, I don't think she's automatically a liar. I also don't believe every word she says just because she says she was assaulted. That's not enough. That's not a sufficient condition to be believed without, for me, just saying it isn't enough. Making an accusation isn't enough. Because, as personally, I've been the target of a false accusation. So I want to see some rigor here. I want to see some evidence. I want to see some, okay, let's have a look. And actually, I did talk about this in my Twitter thing, and that I can look at. So I was just attacked in my mentions a lot this week. People, burners coming in, you say you're a feminist. If you don't believe Tara, you're not really a feminist. I am not going to let people gatekeep me. I was also told, again, by a man who knows nothing about feminism, that me evaluating writings by Tara from last year is somehow like making it harder for victims to come forward. GTFO with that BS, honestly. So don't try to mansplain my feminism to me, especially when you are just showing up to the Me Too conversation and I've been here the whole time. Sorry, that was a little bit, but it annoyed me. Now, what was I looking for? I was going to look for, oh yes, that's in my bookmarks. Yeah, so I have been dragged for not immediately, unquestioningly, submitting myself to the accusations, of the accuracy and complete veracity, not even daring to doubt anything Tara has said, on the pain of being called a bad feminist. And that's just not the case. It's not how we've done it. And so I had to go back. Here's the tweet I'm looking for. I'll bring it up here, pop it in. So people were basically saying I'm a terrible feminist because I wasn't, 5 minutes after I heard the accusations, I wasn't out there condemning Biden as a rapist. Apparently, as soon as you hear Joe Biden has been accused of digital penetration, you have to declare him as a rapist, is the standard from some burners. It's bullying. It's politically manipulative. It's leveraging sexual assault allegations rather than actually caring about the sexual assault allegations, and it's disgusting. So, yeah, y'all who do that are trash. What is my position when it comes to the court of public opinion? And because I had been attacked, I went and found, you can see it's the same picture, but I did a search of my old Twitter feed because I knew I had said something, at least once, on Twitter about my approach to these cases in the light of the George Takei cautionary tale. Right? And it basically comes down to credibility. That is my metric. It's the metric for the accused and the accuser in terms of who is telling a more credible story. So, this was from February 27th, 2018, where I write, just an FYI, credibly accused is the standard for sexual harassment and assault discussions post-Me Too. We no longer assume that the, usually, man is innocent by default. Look at the accusations, at the defense, and consider who is more credible. That is the court of public opinion metric. So, that is what I'm doing I am looking into the credibility of the accusations being made. So, I will also say I don't have, I haven't made up my mind yet. And that's okay, right? I don't have to make up my mind within a day and a half or 16 seconds or anything, right? I've been looking into this on my own time. I've been working on honestly, it's been a side project for me. This is the other thing. You're like, you need to look at everything now and make up your mind now. No, I don't. Like, my opinion, honestly, doesn't change anything about this case, about the facts that happened in the past. But what people want to do, of course, is they want to push you, pressure you, bully you into, committing to vote for Sanders. So that if whatever reason, even if these, even if, let's say, her accusations were retracted, they go, oh, but you still said you'd vote for Sanders. I mean, I just, these people are so annoying and terrible. Yeah, I've been working on polishing up my course on CC licensing is finishing up tomorrow. So I'm wrapping up all of my assignments and things like that, so I can hand in my work and get my certificate. It was actually really exciting on a complete, because I need some kind of emotional break from this. Today I was, because, working on the weekends, I'm not supposed to technically, but every day is the same, and so you kind of get things done. But a colleague had a question about Creative Commons licenses today, about whether or not if you include a share-alike image in a collection of works, like in a series of slides, and then you want to Creative Commons license the entire work, must you then make the entire work a share-alike license, or can you just make it CC BY? And I could answer the question that if you are in doing a collection that doesn't adapt or transform the stuff in any way, you're just copying and sharing it, then even if you have a share-alike image or thing inside the collection as a whole, you don't have to make it a share-alike license. Look at me being all smart. But and then she had other questions too, and I was just like, I know the answers to all these questions. I can help. So that was like, I actually felt good this morning when I got that email in, and I looked at all her questions, and I went, I know all the answers because I read a book. So, hopeful burner supporters are being horrible just because some are abusive. I try very much to distinguish between burners and Bernie supporters. I have a lot of friends who support Bernie, and in my mind, those people, decent people, are a different category from the kind of people who show up in my mentions. So yeah, I mean, if Bernie supporters don't want to be labeled as alongside the horrible burners, maybe step up a little bit more. It's your community. You can't fix it by whining about it to me. I mean, or just saying, oh, isn't it too bad? There's some self-policing. We talk about role models. Oh, and speaking of role models, just again with an overview. So the Biden campaign issued a statement. Maybe we'll take a look at that. They're denying the accusations and inviting vetting of the story, because from their point of view, it's false, and so vetting will shine a light on that. This whole thing was being pushed out. The whole Tara Reade thing came out of Rose Twitter. It came out of the Bernie movement. This is a fact. Okay. Her story that was out there since, we'll look at some stuff from 2019, was resurrected in the last week by Bernie Sanders supporters like Crystal Ball and Jonathan Toure and other Bernie-based outlets. And then it was picked up on Rose Twitter, and it was made into a hashtag. So her accusations are undeniably linked up with the partisanship of the Bernie Sanders campaign. And again, for me, that doesn't really matter. I'm looking at her words and what she said over time, but it's not a good look, because again, then it politicizes this, which is what some people's goals are. But personally, I think that misusing Me Too in that way is a bad precedent. But politics is politics, so what are you gonna do? All right. Right, so here's where I am with this. I wanted to so I heard about it, like I said, after a happy hour. I could not be dealing with finding out who Tara Reade was at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was. So I put it away till the next day and started to look into it a little bit. I did a Twitter, I think the night of, I did a Twitter search of her name, and almost immediately, I mean, if you go on Twitter, there are a bunch of Biden people who are bringing up stuff, pointing out things she said in the past. Also, people who are Biden supporters who are making what I think are completely unrelated accusations about her loving Russia. Again, her loving Russia isn't a direct piece of evidence related to her story, like her, and when I say her story, I don't mean like she's making up a story, her account, her accusations, okay? So I don't want to people think I say the word story to characterize it as fictional, all right? But when you look at her accounts, shall we say, where was I going with this? Right, yeah, so there are Biden people out there who are being crap, and although they don't come into my mentions, so I see them less often, and also the story has just really not been picked up, so it's also not on my radar as much. I'm only really going into this because I'm, people are dragging me into this by showing up on my mentions and basically trying to tell me I'm not a good feminist if I don't vote for Bernie because of Tara. So you figure out that logic. But I looked at, like Richard Painter, I think, talked about her Russian ties and decided that was irrelevant. So I don't really pay attention to that. People who want to track which candidate she supported over time, I looked at those tweets and I got, that's not relevant. But she does have her own writings. So Tara Reade had, so according to her count, how do I best say this that's accurate? In 1993, she worked for Joe Biden, and something, she's accusing him of bad behavior. What that bad behavior is has changed over time. So we'll say that. And apparently she's been trying to get the story out since 1993, which means, in theory, I guess, well, like the Obama people would have known about it, but I don't know if they vetted on it because they don't make these things public. So I don't know if her story has been vetted ever before this time. But so she was trying to get her story out apparently since 1993. And last year, there was a bit of a Me Too movement for Joe Biden. You guys probably will remember that it was pointed out, women were complaining, that he was very touchy in a creepy way. There was a sense of entitlement that if it was a woman, it was okay for him to kind of just treat her or touch her in a way that he never would a man. Grabbing shoulders, nuzzling hair, whatever it was. He had very gendered sexual double standards, and he was too what's the word, how was I? Yeah, he just displayed a kind of paternalistic access or right to access women's bodies that he just didn't show for men. And none of them were sexual assault. They were like uncomfortableness or touching someone's arm, touching someone in another place. And one woman came forward, and then another woman came forward, and I don't actually remember all the details. I don't know if you guys want us to look at us, but we can look them up. And there was, a good handful, half a dozen or so, I don't actually remember all the numbers, of women who said, look, Joe Biden, he touched me in ways that, it didn't violate me, but I didn't feel comfortable. It wasn't a sexual assault, but it was a violation of my personal autonomy. And multiple people, again, it was the Me Too pattern. One person came forward and made an accusation that turned out we had documentary evidence for it, or there were witnesses, contemporary witnesses, who remember seeing it or who remember being told about it at the time. And then another person came out and had a similar story with similar attestations, and then another person came out. And so you saw that this pattern of behavior was consistent across women, and it represented an attitude that Joe Biden had in terms of the accessibility of women's bodies, and in his mistaken view that he could just kind of touch them like they're all his daughter or his wife or some sort of intimate family member by virtue of them being a woman. All right, so, and he had his kind of Me Too. We saw that pattern. While these particular accusations of inappropriate, like not sexual assault, but creepy, we'll just call it like creepy touching Joe, were going on, Tara Reade stepped up and said, "This happened to me too." So, if we look here, yep, she went to her local paper, if I understand this correctly, and yeah, yes, so she came forward to talk about this. It says here, and this was from April 3rd, 2019, so just over almost a year ago. The Nevada County, News for Nevada County, California. Oh, okay. It's California, not Nevada. I guess I would be, could see where I made the mistake thinking it was in Nevada, but it's Nevada County. All right. So let's see what she says. A Nevada County woman has added her voice to a recent spate of allegations that former Vice President and possible presidential candidate Joe Biden touched her when she worked in his U.S. Senate office. Alexandra Tara Reade said that in 1993, she was in her mid-20s when Biden, then a senator from Delaware, touched her several times, making her feel uncomfortable. Reade said her responsibilities in the senator's office were reduced after she refused to serve drinks at an event, what she called a desire of Biden's because he liked her legs. Reagan said she felt pushed out and left Biden's employ in August 1993 after some 9 months. Quoting from Reade, "He used to put his hand on my shoulder and run his finger up my neck," Reade said. "I would just kind of freeze and wait for him to stop doing that." A confidant of Reade at the time, granted anonymity by the union, confirmed that Reade's relayed the story shortly after the events occurred. Quote, "Back then, back there, things just happened," unquote, the friend said. Reade is the most recent woman to publicly share her story about uncomfortable encounters with Biden. Time.com states former Nevada State Assemblywoman Lucy Flores told her story last week. Flores said Biden approached her at a 2014 campaign rally and kissed the back of her head. A second woman, Amy Lapos, said Biden touched her face and rubbed noses with her. Oh, God. God. At a 2009 fundraiser. Caitlin Caruso said Biden put his hand on her thigh and hugged her at a university event. DJ Hill said Biden in 2012 touched her shoulder before moving his hand down her back. Other women have defended Biden in the wake of recent allegations against him. Stephanie Carter, wife of former Defense Secretary Ash Carter, appeared in a photo used in a misinformation campaign against Biden. She called the former vice president a close friend in a USA Today story. Biden in a Wednesday tweet said he understands social norms are changing. Quote, "I've heard all these women are saying what all these women are saying," Biden tweets states. "Politics to me has always been about making connections, but I will be more mindful about respecting personal space in the future. That's my responsibility, and I will meet it." All right. So I think this is important because it does come up later. I'm going to continue to go on to the allegations. Employment documents provided by Reade show that she worked in Biden's office from December 1992 till August of 93. Reade recalled a handful of times Biden touched her. On one occasion, they were before a group of interns when he put his finger on her neck. She doesn't remember how many times Biden touched her in that manner. Quote, "I was trying to be seen as professional," Reade added. Reade said her expulsion from Biden's office stemmed from an early staff argument over the suggestion she served drinks at an event. According to Reade, Biden wanted her to serve because he liked her legs. Reade didn't hear Biden make that suggestion, instead learning of it through his staff's argument. Reade opted against serving drinks, a move she believes sidelined her career. Let's see, and then she says she couldn't get a job. Reade said she spoke to U.S. Senate personnel about her concerns. Word got back to Biden's office. My life was hell. It was about power and control. I couldn't get a job on the Hill. In June 93, Reade found herself in an office without windows. 2 months later, she left Biden's office. Reade said Biden's senior staff protected the senator. She was considered a distraction. She said she didn't consider the acts toward her sexualization. And this is important, because we're being asked, so this is what she put out in the public last year. Reade said she didn't consider the acts toward her sexualization. She instead compared her experience to being a lamp. Quote, "It's pretty, set it over there," she said. "Then when it's too bright, you throw it away," unquote. Reade said she tried to share her story when she worked for Biden but was told to say nothing. Then Biden ran on Barack Obama's ticket. Reade thought he might have changed. Reade said she rethought her years-long role as a foot soldier in the Democratic Party when she learned of Flores' disclosure. She wants more than "I'm sorry" from Biden. Quote, "I changed the trajectory of your life," unquote, she wants to hear him say, quote unquote, "I'm sorry." All right, so that was the first, I think that's the oldest piece of writing on this that was out there that I could find in terms of her account. And then she also wrote this opinion piece on April 17th. It was published. And in here she gives her own account of what she says happened. And I don't want to go through all of it, but she describes a situation where she is upset about being, the touching, but nothing else. And then, so I'm working my way forward in terms of all of her interviews and stuff, and because I haven't completed my work yet. I'm still in the process of making up my mind, so I don't believe Tara, and I don't believe Tara because I am still making up my mind. Here is what I will say, though. When I looked at her prior comments and her prior story, and you compare like what's in this newspaper article to what she writes herself, to another piece where she's describing what happened to her here in The Intercept, I'm finding discrepancies in terms of why she left. And it's not like on the details of the particular assaults. Not like, it was a Tuesday, it was a Wednesday, I was wearing a blue skirt, I was wearing a teal skirt. Like, it's not that kind of stuff. So when I went to go back and get her timeline of just, like the events, her stories about what happened in her first version are inconsistent. And this raises red flags for me. Like, I haven't made up my mind yet, but I'm not at the point of finding her. If you had to ask me, do I think she's a credible witness right now? I have my doubts. And I haven't made up my mind yet because I'm going forward. I'm going to be looking at the rest of her material that's out here, like the stuff she said before she made this particular accusation, and then what she's saying after she's made this accusation. And the Biden campaign has only just reacted with a denial. And so I haven't had a chance to look at that either. But because she chose to edit her story, what she's saying now is she didn't come out with the full story when other women were doing it. She only brought out the part of the story that matched what other women were saying at the time. Okay, I'm just going to put a pin in that. It's not a determination for me, but what she's saying is I didn't tell the whole story the first time. I told an edited version of the story. And yet it doesn't lend to credibility, because one of the things that other Me Too victims have been is consistent. Like when the women talked about what Louis C.K. did, They didn't come out with the first version of it where he just pulled down his pants and then stop there and not talk about himself gratifying himself, you know, in front of them. It's not like there were two versions. There was like, oh, he just pulled down his pants and that was it. And then coming out later and saying, oh, well, after he pulled down his pants, he also did this. Again, it's not definitive, but does it concern me that she already has done this thing where she's edited out certain stuff and only told us certain things? And now she's got a different version of events. And so I am, I'm not convinced based on what I've read so far. I'm still withholding judgment, but I think that Tara Reade has some credibility issues. And I'm not saying that she's lying. What I'm saying is I have concerns about what I've seen so far. And I haven't made up my mind yet because, like I said, this isn't my full-time job and I'm doing this on the side. But what I'm trying to do is, I made the comparison to what gospel scholars do, right? When people read the Gospels, they start at the beginning of the story and they read to the end. And then they go to the next one and they start at the beginning and they read to the end, right? But what scholars do is they put the stories next to each other. And they read, okay, what's the first thing in the story? Like, what's the first part of the story? What's the second part of the story? And then in each version, they're like, are the sequence of events the same? Is the description the same? Are the causes of various things the same? So when I'm reading Tara's accounts, and I'm not just reading the most recent one, I'm going back to seeing what she said first, you know, chronologically. Like, what does she say? What does she describe happening first in this story? And what was her version of who knew what? And why did she leave the office? And was she forced out, or was she forced to resign? Or did she leave it on her own? Or was she fired? And when there are big discrepancies in stuff that shouldn't have discrepancies, that raises some concerns for me. And so I have to withhold a final judgment. And that is where I am on this story. I guess I could put you out and hold. I mean, I can just tell you where I am. At the moment, I don't know who to believe. At the moment, I am still looking at the information that's been made available. And, you know, I got so much crap, people just seeking me out, going, you're a bad feminist if you don't believe Tara, within, you know, like not even asking what I knew about it, just accusing me. So I'm going to take my time and make up my mind. And when I ask people like, well, you know, what have you done? You say, okay, you believe her, but what have you looked at? And like, oh, well, I watched her interview and she seemed believable to me. Like, okay, well, I'm doing a little bit more work than that. Like, I am, you know, again, especially having been someone falsely accused. I knew I had to get my ducks in a row. I had to get my evidence in a row to defend myself, right? So I had to go to the ED article and look at who put the entry in and what date and the timeline of information and when did, you know, like the YouTube channel name with Baring's actual name get posted, and then how many days was that between when that got posted and the information about his girlfriend got posted, and, you know, when was the first time I looked at, you know, it's like I knew what I didn't do. And I had a way of laying out my facts, and my facts didn't change. My story didn't change because the facts didn't change. What happened didn't change. And that kind of consistency, not again on the details of the particulars of the assault, right? When she talks about being assaulted, I would never kind of hold someone to those kinds of details because your brain gets foggy. But your details on, like, you know, why you left the office, that shouldn't change. And they are linked. Credibility is linked across, you know, consistency is across stories is linked. And the other thing that she's done, and I put it more in a tweet than I have here, but in her various writings about Biden before this month, which was her choice. Nobody like made her write about this, but one of the things, I hope you can't hear my stomach. My stomach is growling like crazy because of the coffee I've been having. Oh, this is a great picture. I don't quite understand it, but I just love the cat's face. Social distancing, social media, and me. Yeah. But anyway. Where did I put it? Nope, must go down. Thought I had a whole thread of, yes, this is it. Oh, and I've gotten yelled at for even, by the way, I've been like, oh, why are you doing this? Why don't you just believe? I know, it's just, yeah. So, one thing that she went out of her way to do, and she didn't have to do this, and I don't understand. Let me just be honest. If a man digitally sexually assaulted you, I can't use the R word. I think I'll get demonetized, and so I have to be kind of careful about it. I probably already ruined it, but he violated you. You and your body and your dignity. So, just with that perspective, these things, these bits in her writing that she herself offered up strike me as worthy of pause. Reade said Biden's senior staff protected the senator. She was considered a distraction. Reade said she didn't consider the acts toward her sexualization. Instead, she compared her experience to being a lamp. It's pretty, set it over there, then when it's too bright, you throw it away. Why she didn't consider the acts toward her sexualization, however, she was hiding the fact that he had sexually assaulted her in this is her account. So considering she knew that had happened to her, that he had sexualized her, in that way in order to, according to her accusations, assault her, why would she offer up that characterization of his actions? Like, that to me just doesn't make sense. Even if she didn't want to say that all of the acts were sexualized because it would kind of link up to the assaults, she wouldn't have to say anything. And if it was just the one-off, you go, oh, well, maybe this is a question. This question was asked by the reporter. Maybe the reporter said, did you feel sexualized? And then she said no, and then she compared it to being a lamp, and this is how they worded it. Well, then the next time I read something from her, all right, so this is what I like saying about reading across. Now back to my story. What Joe Biden did in his interactions with me is really not much different than what happens in other workplaces. I have not told the whole story of what occurred between Joe Biden and myself. And then she talks about the threats against her. But if what happened between Joe Biden and her was a sexual assault, that doesn't happen in the workplace. And I would presume, again, I can't know her mind, but I would think it would be reasonable to link inappropriate touching in the office with the eventual sexual assault she's accusing him of. So why would she call her interactions with him mundane? Again, she didn't have to characterize it in that way at all. But she chose to, knowing she was hiding information from the public about a sexual assault that was very different. So again, this it's another data point. She also wrote this in a piece, I think, for Medium. I can get you the source. But in her story about Joe Biden, she writes, she chose these words, all right? This is her story about Joe Biden. We are sexual beings, and we are all trying to figure out how to express this aspect of ourselves at work and home lives. It is a journey of our society. It is a journey our society is on right now. But this is not a story about sexual misconduct. It's a story about abuse of power. It is a story about when a member of Congress allows staff to threaten or belittle or bully on behalf of on their behalf, unchecked, to maintain power rather than modify the behavior. But it was a story about sexual misconduct. If we were to take her claims right now as being accurate in representing what happened to her. So she didn't have to say that her story wasn't a story about sexual misconduct. She could have said this is a story about abuse of power, but she decided to characterize it in that way herself. knowing, again, let's assume, right, knowing she was hiding a story about being digitally penetrated, being raped, digitally raped. This raises questions in my mind because nobody is forcing her, nobody forced her to choose this phrasing, but this is how she is choosing to characterize her experience. And she seems to be the one divorcing her experience of being touched by Joe Biden from sexualization or sexual misconduct, or it's somehow out of the ordinary. And I to me, if she was touched and she felt the personal, if she had the thing on the neck and he did touch her shoulders, which there's not a lot of reason to doubt he did that because we've seen him do it, then this makes sense to me, because he is basically he has a sense of, well, she's really complaining more about staff here, honestly. She's not even complaining about Biden in this characterization. She's talking more about the staff. But if it ended there, then these comments make more sense to me than if she's hiding a sexual assault this whole time. Not, I think it's probative. I don't think it's definitive. But when people ask me, like, where am I on the Tara Reade accusations? These are the kinds of things when I look into it that I go, I'm not ready to make a public comment. I'm not ready to get on anybody's side yet. I am on the evidence's side. And since we're still early days, the other thing we have yet to see, and it could change because there hasn't been a lot of media coverage of this, but whereas before, when a woman came forward to complain about Joe Biden's behavior, other women came up to describe similar behavior. Tara Reade made these accusations about being digitally penetrated a couple days ago. To my knowledge, no one else has come up to share their story, but we know from Me Too, you gotta wait. You gotta wait with this stuff because sometimes it takes people a little bit to be brave. So, I am not on hashtag I believe Tara. I am not on hashtag I don't believe Tara. I have concerns about Tara's story. I have questions about Tara's story. I have not made up my mind. But, when I've looked at other Me Too stories, one thing that's really super important is that they don't say, well, I didn't tell the story the first time. Now I'm changing my story. Now I'm going to add things to my story. And, one might say, plausibly, that for a victim, when they come forward, it's very difficult to come forward. And so they might not want to share everything. Okay, I get that. But then you're basically, what you're doing when you come forward with only part of the story is you're lying by omission. And maybe you're doing that for good reasons. Maybe it's too personal. But it's still a lie of omission, if you get what I mean. Because then you're going to come back later and say, oh, I didn't tell you everything. And people are asking, well, why didn't you say that the first time? Why didn't you tell me the whole truth the first time? And that's actually a valid question. I'm not saying that it's always a reason to doubt anyone. I'm not saying you have to dismiss them. But if someone comes and tells you only half the story, and you believe it's a full part of the story, and then they come back later and say, oh, no, I changed my mind. And again, these are things that happened in 1993, so she's had some time to process this. I just don't think it is a good look for victims to come forward and then change their stories. I understand why people might do it, but even if I understand why they do it, it doesn't mean that I don't have to evaluate that when I look at their evidence. Because what's to say she won't come out next week and say that there's something else she hasn't told us? And that's why the credibility thing, it comes back to the credibility thing. And whether it's, and who is more credible? And this is what I said in that tweet in 2018. So I'm going to bring it back to my comments that I made earlier, right? Because I am being consistent when it comes to, this Dominic Cummins running away. I am being consistent when it comes to what I think the court of public opinion should be based on, which is that, I've got to go down the other way. I think I've it almost memorized now, but yeah. We no longer assume the man is innocent by default. We look at the accusations, the defense, and we consider who is more credible. And that's what I'm in the middle of. So that is where I am. Like I said, I'm not hashtag I believe Tara. I have serious concerns about some of the things in her story. On the other hand, I'm not to the point where I think she's making stuff up. I don't, I would still like to see more evidence, honestly. So I've been working, what I decided the best thing to do would be, was to go in chronological order. So I went back to the first thing I found about her online, which was that article from the Union newspaper. And then after that, I think I saw the piece on Medium, but then I found her editorial so the order that they went in, like I looked at them, was to look at this story first in 2019. And then I think I looked at this one next. And then I looked at her own words as well. So I haven't gotten as far as the current accusations. So I will also then have to try, because it's work. Guys, this is work. Like having to keep track of her stories and the details and timeframes and who she mentions and who she doesn't mention and the reasons she gives for why she was fired or why she left or why people were mad changes a lot. So I'm trying to keep track of all this. And I'm gonna trace the information, as it comes out. And then of course there's the whole Biden allegation or denial. And this is the point I wanted to make. She said she filed a complaint in 1993. Okay, that was a long time ago, to be fair. And I don't know how long such complaints are kept on file. If it would be possible, I would really like to see. This would actually go a long ways, I think, to helping me with her credibility problems that I currently have and things that she says. I'm like, is I wanted to see her contemporaneous account. That would probably be, because what she wrote in 1993, even if it's shaded a bit in order to be diplomatic or whatever else, the language she uses, the timetable, the names that she mentions when it was still fresh in her mind and contemporaneous, I think would be really, really helpful. It's an independent witness, as it were, to what happened. And we don't have to rely on her memory of what she said, or we don't have to rely on Biden's staff memory of what they saw in the complaint or whatever else. I'd like to see the complaint itself. Beyond that, I don't know how much more evidence can really come out, but we'll see. So that is where I am. I don't know. But it concerns me that I have concerns. It concerns me that I have concerns. On a completely different level, there was this point being made in the papers. Why has the media ignored sexual assault allegations against Joe Biden? Joe Biden's sexual assault accuser wants to be able to... I don't know what this... Is this going to give me a little drop down? No. Yeah, I think that, the media needs to do the vetting on the story. It has not been picked up by the mainstream media. That could be, understandably, because there's an epidemic going on and there's not as much airtime. That airtime right now is being dedicated to covering medically accurate advice, local stories about the outbreak, the president's crazy press conference nonsense that happens day on day, and then what's happening in Congress to deal with it. I get that takes up 95% of the media space right now. I don't see that changing, if I'm honest. I do think that because Rose Twitter kind of pushed this out there and got it trending, and Bernie-friendly outlets put it out there, they were whining that within a day and a half, nobody had taken it seriously. More are covering the issue, but not like it's not been a big story. And another thing, and I'll just say this, I was getting dragged for not being out there with, I believe Tara before Bernie Sanders was. And it's coming out of his campaign, and it's coming from his campaign supporters. So now that Joe Biden has come out and said it's not, can we find the denials? I guess we've looked at her stuff. We can look at his stuff as well. All right. Campaign. Now, however, yes. Yeah, so at the time, she said she left because she was disturbed by, last year, Tara Reade had been among a number of women to speak out about how Biden's behavior had made them feel uncomfortable in the past. At the time, she said she was still left disturbed by memories from nearly 30 years ago when working as a Senate staffer for Biden in 1993. The then senator would do things like put his hand on her shoulders or run his finger up and down her neck. Other women told similar stories of shoulder rubs or nuzzling of the hair. Now, however, Reade says that during that same time period, Biden sexually assaulted her, pushing her against a wall and digitally penetrating her. When she moved away, the former senator staffer says Biden said he thought she had liked him. The former Senate staffer shared her account in an interview with podcast host Katie Halper, as well as The Intercept, which brought attention to Reade's claims earlier this week. On Friday, she told Newsweek that her primary goal in speaking out was to be able to share her story without having to prioritize the reputations of powerful men. I'm not going to get traditional justice like with Harvey Weinstein's case. I'm looking for something more existential, to not have to keep a secret because it's somebody powerful. Biden's campaign team has categorically denied the allegations, which Deputy Campaign Manager and Communications Director Katie Bedingfield called false. Quote, "Women have a right to tell their story, and reporters have an obligation to rigorously vet those claims," Bedingfield said. "We encourage them to do so because these accusations are false." And then there's a testimonial. "In all my time, I have no knowledge. Clearly false allegations are in complete contradiction to both the inner workings of our Senate office and to the man I know and worked with so closely." That would be interesting. Like, this is the kind of stuff I'm hoping for. So I have absolutely no knowledge or memory of Mrs. Reade's accounting of events, which would have left a searing impression on me as a woman professional and as a manager. These clearly false allegations are in complete contradiction to both the inner workings of our Senate office and to the man I know and worked with closely. I don't know what these, inner workings of our Senate office, I don't know what they were in 1993. It'd be helpful if they had some documentation. So, Reade said she had considered coming forward with her allegations a number of times in recent years, including when former President Barack Obama ran for president. In early January of this year, however, she decided that it was time to tell her story, despite facing widespread scrutiny and backlash after speaking out with less specificity about the former vice president's behavior back in April. She was looking for time up to get support in public relations services, and at the time she said she believed Biden might drop out of the race. Since the former vice president had fallen behind in the polls, she said it was important to share her story to ensure that powerful people are held to account. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. I'm not going to go through all of it because I didn't actually intend to read this much in the beginning. I just saw this as we were looking through. So that is kind of how the press is portraying it when they were picking it up. So watch the space, I guess. And we'll see if time reveals more, or if the story gets hotter, or if it fades. So, and I'm sure that if it, other people don't come forward and say, yes, this also happened to me, then Tara Reade is kind of going to be out there having, had an allegation she is standing behind, but not one, unlike with the other Joe Biden situations where other people are coming forward. Or who knows, in a week's time, we might be sat here with 3 more allegations of Joe Biden digitally penetrating people. I don't know, but that's where we are. So, all right, well, I guess Videodrome is having their own little personal takes in the chat. So, I'm tired. This has been almost 2 hours. I was only thinking I'd get an hour of material. But I guess the whole Tara Reade thing, I would say, like I said, be cautious. And if you do believe her, that's fine. I mean, I would, it has to, I would say look to the evidence. That's what I'm trying to do, but I'm not going to tell people not to believe her. But I won't be voting for Bernie no matter what. Like, Joe Biden could drop out tomorrow. I still won't vote for Bernie. And that's my show, guys. So, yeah, that's it. I think there's probably going to be a happy hour Monday night because I did this show and I've got homework to do. So I've got to focus on that and get that done. And then after that, I can actually do a little bit of a promo for the happy hour. Sargon was on a live stream talking about routinizing, making women have babies. I don't know the whole details. I saw some people talking scuttlebutt about it, so I think Kevin and I are going to watch that. He's seen it, I believe. I'm holding off, so at least one of us live reacts. I think it's kind of, unless it's something like we have to prep some fact checking, before the show. I think it's kind of nice if at least one of us live reacts, because then it's like a genuine reaction as opposed to, oh, here's a joke coming up, I'm going to laugh at it a second time. So I kind of like the mix of one person having watched and one person not having watched. I think that's good. And then also Candace Owens has just been moronic, and we want to call out Candace Owens. So for the next happy hour, at least we have two edgelords putting out terrible takes that we're going to go over. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for me, folks. I don't have time for the chat. I'm sorry, I'm really tired, guys. Been talking for 2 hours. And stay safe. Stay indoors. Stay away from everybody else. Stay away. Wash your hands. Use hand sanitizer. And do things that make you happy to offset the general stress of everything. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. It's going to be difficult for lots more people as we go on. And we're all going to need a good reserve of some rest and positivity to make it through. So I am sending you my best wishes, my best hopes for your health, for the well-being of you and yours and your family and friends, your neighborhood, your city, your state. And until next time, I've been Christy. You have been awesome. And I'll see you most likely on another happy hour. So, thanks for coming by. See ya.